Hello and welcome to the Wonkette Weekend Not So Live Chat. I am Robyn Pennacchia, and with me, as always, is the lovely and talented Stephen Robinson.
Hi,
Hey,
Robyn.
Stephen.
How are you?
I'm swell. How are you doing?
I'm okay. And as you would normally say, we'd be better if you would like, share, and subscribe. Uh,
We
so,
switched
um,
positions, so now it's your job to say that. So,
yes, we've switched positions. I was a little late coming on. So, on the day that we're recording this, on Friday, it was a big news day. We'll cover that and go to something else. But Sandra Day O'Connor, the first woman Supreme Court justice, died at 93. She was not still on the court. She had actually retired. She also surprised a lot of people by literally still being alive. I think because it was a shock that
yeah,
people retire, I think. So the fact that she's
yeah.
still there, they assume she must have just died. But instead, she regenerated into Samuel Alito. It was a very unsuccessful turn of events. Um, and George Santos, also the first female Supreme Court justice, according to his resume, was expelled from the House of Representatives. I will be doing a year in George Santos because
Ooh.
it is so much fun. I think it was around December that I kind of wrote about how he had lied about everything, and then now he's like out. So it's kind of a very fun season of the House of Representatives. Um, so both of those stories are on Wonkette. You should read those from Robyn, who had a very nice look at O'Connor and her
I tried
legacy.
so hard to be nice. Like I lost it at certain points.
Yeah, she was conservative, but she was a rational human being. She
Yeah.
was not, I would say, um, not an ideologue. I
Mhm.
think that's the challenge. I think the these latest three are zealots, but not because of Trump. I think specifically because he just picked them out of the Federal Society
Yeah.
centerfold, but specifically, and we've discussed this with Jamie, because no more suitors became a rallying cry. So for a generation of justices, it's sort of like they're they're just politicians. They're just advocating. Um, but in a broader political case, we'd wanted to talk about the actor Julianna Margulies, who on a podcast went on what I think can fairly be called a racist rant against my ungrateful kind. Um,
It's
have
really
you seen this?
jarring.
Did you see US and the Holocaust, the Ken Burns documentary? Everyone should watch it. It should be mandatory watching, especially for the Black community, if I may, because Hitler got his entire playbook from the Jim Crow South. The Nazis were watching how the Jim Crow South were treating slaves and said, oh, great call. Let's do that playbook. That's what we'll do to the Jews. Which is also why in the civil rights movement, the Jews were the ones that walked side by side with the Blacks to fight for their rights because they know. And now the Black community isn't embracing us and saying, we stand with you the way you stood with us. Jews died for their cause. Where's the history lesson in that? Who's teaching these kids? Because the fact that the entire Black community isn't standing with us, to me, says either they just don't know, or they've been brainwashed to hate Jews. But when you've been marginalized so much as a community, the way I feel we have, isn't that when you step up?
Starts out with saying that Adolf Hitler got his entire playbook from the Jim Crow South. That is true. However, it is also the type of thing that someone saw in a meme, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's okay, that's true, but you learned that a week ago in a meme. And then she goes on to say, in the civil rights movement, the Jews were the ones that walked side by side with the blacks.
The blacks.
That's, you're
That's a
in
thing that
trouble.
non-racist people say all the time. The black. Very well known fact.
On Family Guy, the Brian the dog,
Yeah.
it was going on. It was just like what happened to the blacks. And Stewie's like, black, like he has like look up the blacks to fight for their rights.
Yeah.
And now the black community isn't embracing us and saying, we stand with you the way you stood with us. So there's a lot to unpack there. So first off, if she correctly notes that Hitler took, a lot of what he did from the Jim Crow South, from segregation. So one would argue that never again would mean in America, if they do this to Black people, they will probably come for Jews next. So it's not entirely, the spinning of it as this entirely generous, kind act, as if I see your house burning across the street, so I go and put it out, even though there's no risk of that coming to me, as opposed to your room in my house is on fire. So maybe I need to put that fire out. I can't just like, oh, Robyn's room is on fire, everything's going to be okay for me. Like, no, it's going to spread. And when that's stated, it also, the implication is that either I don't have the same skin in the game as you do. I don't share your fight, your struggle on a personal level. And I am not, just from a moral standpoint, even if I don't like you or don't whatever, I am not driven from a moral standpoint to fight for what is right. It is just, I expect something in return. It's transactional and withdraw it at any time. And she's not the only one saying this. We've been seeing a lot of
oh yeah, it's been a whole thing.
All online of like, I want to, if you could address this a bit, because you were sort of, to quote Barbara Lee again, prematurely correct about challenges Biden might have with both young people, specifically Muslim communities. And a lot of that came to pass, even though what I've seen is two things. Either they don't believe the polls, or they will say, which is actually worse than not believing the polls, you just get racist and just say, well, if any Muslim in Michigan won't vote for Biden because of this, they deserve what Trump's going to do to them.
Yeah, that's really been what I've seen more of. The people who are like, well, Trump's gonna send you all back to where you came from, which in many cases is in fact Michigan. It's not probably most cases is Michigan. Or horrible things are going to happen to you and you're going to deserve it. You're bringing it on yourself. And there's always this like, well, if you say anything against Biden or say anything against what the Democrats are doing, you're going to deserve whatever terrible things happen to you with Republicans. And that, that goes for everyone. No one is ever allowed to be like, hey, perhaps you are wrong on this. Or, hey, I'm, maybe going to withhold my vote. Maybe I'm not going to feel like getting out there and voting for you and working for you and going door to door for you. And all of that I was doing because you fucking screwed me. Like you did things that people that I care about. Like it's.
Well, and it's true, right? Because 2016, the argument was, oh, you dummies, you voted for Joe Stein or you stayed home and look, you got Trump. Like, obviously, whatever issues you had with Hillary Clinton, and, she was, Bernie Sanders didn't make her have dinner with Henry Kissinger and hang out with him. Like, those things were not something that Sanders invented. It's not like, a false narrative. So people had, a lot of the left had little things like that they had concerns about. And obviously, by any measure, Hillary Clinton was preferable to Trump. And so you go out and you It's all harm reduction. If you aren't in pantsuit nation, we get that. But one of the big narratives for folks was, okay, look at Trump. You get a seat at the table if you vote for Democrats, if you come out. So you come out in 2018, if you come out in 2020, you'll get a seat at the table. You can push us to the left. You can advocate for yourself better in that way. And part of that was in 2018, people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and other members of progressive members of the Democratic caucus were elected and were advocating for that. And my understanding was it was something, okay, well, no, that's not what we wanted. We wanted you to sort of do all these things. Like, I mean, Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, they both in Minnesota and Michigan were campaigning door to door for Biden. And suddenly now it's just like, okay, well, that's fine, but you can express differences of opinion. And and not even in a way that our centrist members do. You're not allowed to do that. And if you do, you're responsible for everything Trump is going to do to you. And I feel like that's been a dispiriting narrative. It's not something that is actually going to get out the vote for these folks.
For some reason, people are very committed to this idea that calling people ungrateful brats is like the way to win an election. And they are committed to it. It's going to happen someday if they just keep doing it over and over and over again. People will realize how terrible they are and, bend the knee. That is very much like been the tactic for a while now. And it's why they think nothing of wielding it. It's why Julianna Margulies thought absolutely nothing of basically in one of her other very, very racist statements saying that, all these people make us call them they, them, all these trans people. Well, if they were in Palestine, the Muslims would behead them and use their heads for a football, which not necessarily. Like, Jesus, that's fucking sick. And like
the use of pronouns.
It's those kids who are spewing this anti-Semitic hate that have no idea if they stepped foot in an Islamic country. These people who want us to call them they, them, or whatever they want us to call them, which I have respectfully really made a point of doing. Like, be whoever you want to be. It's those people that will be the first people beheaded and their heads played with a soccer ball, like a soccer ball on the field. There was a film being shown by this Black lesbian club on Columbia campus, and they put signs up that said "No Jews allowed." And as someone who plays a lesbian journalist on the morning show, I'm more offended by it as a lesbian than I am as a Jew, to be honest with you, because I want to say to them, you fucking idiots. You don't exist. Like, you're even lower than the Jews. A, you're Black, and B, you're gay. And you're turning your back against the people who support you?
It's like the extreme Islamophobia that they are these violent, uncivilized other, which is not always true. And that's why I've always hated, like, when people will do spins on to describe the Klan. They'll talk about the Christian Taliban or, y'all Qaeda. And it's like, well, no, America's been doing this for a long time. And, to me, it would be like the oppression that's going on in Florida from Ron DeSantis saying that I should not have, why do you have any concern for the people he's oppressing in that state? Because he's an oppressor and would do bad things to you. And it's like, yes, I know. So I'm hardly a defender of Hamas. Like, these are awful people, but that's part of the othering, right? That, like, all of these people are the terrorists. It's not the individuals or the literal children that we should care about.
It's dehumanizing is what it is. It's, we're going to, it's easier for people, like a lot of white people, to tolerate the deaths of 15,000 Palestinians than it is for them to tolerate the deaths of 1,200 Israelis. That is true. That is just a fact. They're like, oh, well, that's a statistic. That's just like, they're all bad people anyway. And there were a lot of people saying, well, there's no such thing as an innocent Palestinian. And that was like literally words that came out of people's mouths. And like half of the people there are children, like, who, by the way, were not born when Hamas was elected. It's, and the thing is that, Henry Kissinger died this week, and there is what that man did across the freaking globe, specifically to community. He was able to get away with what he did because he specifically did it to like places where people were not white. That is why he was able to get away with it. You would not be able to get away with, carpet bombing Germany, even like with, like when, other than World War II, like you would not be able to just like, well, actually, technically, it would be more like carpet bombing France during World War II. Like they weren't involved, but he went and got Cambodia involved because he was afraid that, they were going to get with the commies. He had no problem going to all these countries, going to East Timor, going to Bangladesh, going to, all of Latin America, and just doing all this shit that got like millions of people killed. And still people are like, well, he was a statesman. He had some good ideas here and there. It's very easy for people to, in the United States especially, to brush off things like that, to say, oh, well, these people, yeah, a lot of them were killed, but they kind of deserved it, didn't they? Like a little bit. And it's easier for them to say that when it's, not white people.
Well, yeah. And that's what was so strange to me about a lot, again, predominantly white Democrats who expressed the shock when they were seeing polls with Biden doing horribly amongst young people or actually losing ground amongst Black people and Latinos. They were just like impossible, which is just a wonderful thing of like, there's nothing to, because protesting's bad, right? No one wants to see protesters. So like, we can answer a poll and you're not going to listen, and we can't protest and you're not going to listen. So it just seems as if you're just assuming we're at 90%. It's all done by, let me go try to get my suburban white ladies an arm. But one theme, and it's again, if you talk to Black people, and an ongoing theme has been that I think a lot of MAGA can leverage, especially regarding Ukraine, is that the suffering of white people will always be, and like there's no question. I mean, that's the most important. We'll fight to the death to protect white people. We'll send money. We'll send whatever we need to do. Same with Israel, and I know it's more complicated than that. I mean, people are going to lecture me, but I'm just saying, like, we're talking about young people, voters, particularly minorities, and that's a common theme. Has been that case of like, we're not that important to you. Like police reform didn't happen.
They feel like they can just, assume that, they'll vote for us no matter what, because they have no other choice. And that's not really, the kind of thing anyone wants to hear. Like,
it's not democracy. It's like, you guys are not free because the other guy who I'm like, at least with Marjorie Taylor Greene, has photos of Hunter Biden's junk on the floor. She is all out. Like, she doesn't say, okay, well, election's over. I spent the election talking about how terrible Biden is, but now Naomi Biden and I go, shoe shopping when the election's over. And my friends across the aisle, no. She's like, no, I wasn't fooling you before. I wasn't just trying to get your vote. I'm going to do everything I can to take these people out. And she's terrible. I'm not saying she's bad, but like, it seems more consistent than a lot of rhetoric we get from folks who are telling me that, oh my God, you can't even let Nikki Haley get elected because she was going to do all these terrible things to you. And now I'm going to go have dinner with Nikki Haley at the country club. It's like,
yeah,
your friends, like, okay, that just seems strange to me. Yeah, a lot of what Margulies is saying is and you're not here for me. It's very interesting because you could argue that 2016 and then obviously in 2020 was sort of the election for women like her. Like, this is what's important to us, and everyone's going to come out. And if you didn't come out in the right orders, there's still that sort of betrayal myth from 2016.
Yeah.
The narrative, like, you betrayed me, you were dumb. But like saying this about all Black people when, you know, we're supposedly, God knows, I'm sure at some point on her social media profiles was like, Black women saved democracy.
Oh, I'm sure. Yes.
Look at those Black women. They flipped Georgia. They saved us. Black people saved democracy.
I'm the first person to march in Black Lives Matter. When that happened to George Floyd, I put a black screen on my Instagram. Like, I ran to support my Black brothers and sisters. When LGBTQ people are being attacked, I run. I made a commercial for same-sex marriages with my husband in 2012. Like, I am the first person to jump up when something is wrong, as I think most Jews are, because...
And now that we're ignorant and we're dumb, we don't stand with you the way you stood with us. And that is like, what was your father doing during the civil rights movement? What were your parents doing? I know what my parents were doing, like, or their grandparents. What were you doing? Because you're making this out to be like you're assuming this. Yeah.
Well, this is the thing. The idea that it's transactional instead of siding with, those who are being oppressed on principle dirties the whole thing. I also don't see Black people going like, hey, there were Black World War II soldiers who, by the way, did not, get the benefits of the GI Bill.
Yeah.
So, like, why isn't that transactional? No, it's not. And it shouldn't be. Like, doing the right thing should not be transactional. This is the thing. I do understand why a lot of people, maybe Margulies' age, are unfamiliar with why people are supportive of the Palestinians now. This especially has a lot to do with the fact that I think it was like not until like the 1990s that a lot of Israeli documents were released from like the early days and everything that sort of changed the story around a little bit and made it so that it wasn't really quite the story that people have been telling. But a lot of, once people learn about something, they're not usually going to go back and be like, hey, did that change? Was that a little different? Did it turn out to not be an empty desert? Did it turn out that there were in fact people living there? And so there's definitely an informational divide, I think. And I'm not excusing it. I'm saying that there is an informational divide. And so therefore, they've got an entirely different story running in their heads to begin with. And then when you combine that with the idea that people, Black people are supposed to be grateful to anyone who, wasn't actively oppressing them personally, it goes to a dark place.
Well, yeah. I mean, even her original statement, again, you talked about World War II. It'd be very easy. There's no way Cory Booker, or frankly any Black, there are a few Black people who would, or celebrities, even like the equivalents to Julianna Margulies, who would be like, in World War II, the Black people were the ones that fought side by side with white people fighting for rights that we did not enjoy. And now you're not embracing us. Especially the part of you're not. So it's one thing. I think Black celebrities might acknowledge that first part, but if you're on a podcast and being like, that would be everywhere. White people be shocked, like, oh my God, how dare Morgan Freeman or Viola say this terrible thing? Like, what does that have to do with me? Because I wasn't even alive at that time. It's a very big theme amongst white people against critical race theory. And so she adds, like, the fact that the entire Black community isn't standing with us, to me, says either they don't know, which is a way of saying we're ignorant, or they've been brainwashed to hate.
Yeah, the brainwash thing. Yeah.
Which, again, equating Judaism, being an ethnic Jew, as she calls herself, she's not religious, she says, this is her own words, equating that with support for Israel is dangerous. And many Jewish liberals, I've said it's anti-Semitic to say. It's called dual loyalty. And that's and that's in the right, especially Republicans want that, but that's been sort of embraced to the point of that identity is connected to that in a way that is I think dangerous. I mean, I think they even they passed Rashida Tlaib had voted present, but had passed a resolution stating that anti-Zionism is itself anti-Semitic, which is, I think I think a lot of people wouldn't understand how dangerous that is, right? Because the fact that is just any criticism of essentially what many people in good faith believe is just colonialism, right?
Yeah, because it literally is. Like, I understand there are people who just feel like, well, it's not colonialism, it's not ethnic cleansing because, like, we don't think it's bad. It's colonialism if it's bad. And therefore, Israel cannot be doing colonialism. One of the things that Margulies brought up was, well, if you think colonialism is so bad, then you should realize that Native Americans lived here before we did. And like, yeah, they did. They did, and they had a right to be fucking pissed that we took their land. And up until the 1970s, we were portraying them as, villains in every movie that came out.
Yes.
Because, oh my God, how rude. These people are gonna attack us just for stealing their land and giving them smallpox blankets? What? We're here. Do we not deserve to be here? Are you saying we should all die?
Yeah, well, people were shocked because I'd quoted earlier L. Frank Baum, who wrote the book that the musical Wicked's based on. He had stated that after the massacre at Wounded Knee, that we just need to go ahead and exterminate all Native Americans because they were probably real mad and we humiliated them. So that's the best thing. And it's scary. But again, we're seeing very similar rhetoric now. And her exact quote here is, here's what kills me. She says, these kids are calling Jews colonialists. If you're going to go with that argument, reality, then get the fuck out of America, which is always
also a colonial project.
Out of America, which is one of those classic racism.
The brainwashing is that there's this narrative that's been created that Jews are the oppressor, Jews are genocidal.
When have we ever oppressed? Ever? You can use the argument for Israel. The UN. I mean, here's what kills me, is that these kids are calling Jews colonialists. If you're going to go with that argument, kids, then get the fuck out of America.
Right. Because
you were not here first.
Right.
Native Americans were here, and you owe them a big fucking apology and move the fuck out.
Yeah, we're the biggest occupier.
It goes full Trump. That's why I think when you and I have in the past talked about how Trump would win, I think we've recognized that Trumpism is just, it's so easy for someone to slip into full Trumpism. You go in oh my God, all right, you went full Trump in a way that when we say that certain liberal aspects of kindness is aspirational, that's a little harder, but it's so easy to slip into the worst kind of pussy grabbing type of rhetoric. To get the fuck out of America because you were not here first. Native Americans were here first. You owe them a big fucking apology, as you said. Okay, so
if we were standing outside of reservations shooting people in the knee on the regular because they were, protesting how we were treating them, I think that there would be some people who were like, hey, that's not okay. If we killed people at Standing Rock on the regular, or the people who were protesting that, if we had done that, we would have been criticized for it by everyone, including me. I would have been like, hey, we all would have been like, that's really not okay to do to people. But it's supposed to be okay because of these particular circumstances.
Well, and she's when Kyle says that blame Hamas, they're the ones who are responsible for putting, their military installations in hospitals and so forth. But again, if we were just bombing the hell out of, right-wing states, regardless of what happened, because they knew what they were getting into when they elected Ron DeSantis or Tate Reeves and so forth. We understand that that's not. I mean, it's very interesting because it speaks to that of what you're saying, because the whole narrative of the Civil War for years had been Sherman's actions had gone too far, to the point where there was a professor in a Twilight Zone episode who it opens of him reading Sherman for filth for burning Atlanta and doing this noble. And he wasn't a racist. It was presented as just the idea that the Confederates would always have this inherent humanity that we needed to recognize, even though
done on purpose as part of Reconstruction. Like, history was taught in a very particular way so as to make it not seem like the South was that bad. So because they didn't want people to be divided. Like, really, that was part of the effort. Like, they, would very much overemphasize, the wrongs that were done to the South post Civil War and all of these other things. So, and to say like, oh, slavery wasn't the only cause, it was also states' rights, and the economy and things like that. And that was, in the South, they, straight up taught the War of Northern Aggression, but in the North, they weren't teaching, anything too radical either. Like, it was still like, oh, and now everything is great, and no complaints from anyone.
Well, and it's one thing with her statement about, it's one thing she was criticizing all liberals and had forgotten about Black people when she talked about, if you're complaining about colonialism, get out of America. She is specifically talking about Black people.
Yeah,
that's her whole thing. And we are not we are not really part of neither colonialism in America, nor are we part of, I would say, the immigration experience, in the sense of, generally speaking, if I talk to a white person, most white people, they have either a grandparent or a great-grandparent, someone of recent memory who they know came from someplace, came to America. They have the immigration story. No Black person has this. It's very rare to. So, generally speaking, once we were brought here involuntarily, the first slaves brought here in 1619, the first, Black people born in America after 1619, America's their birthright. I mean, we've never gotten it, but it's our birthright. We are indigenous, I would say, to America, because we did not colonize this place. Also, colonialism means that you're a part of that government in some way, either that you could vote for it or support it, or at least benefiting from it. We were the commodification, being commodified. So what she says is like uber racist, but a lot of, as I said, was one of the, one of the liberals who I've seen constantly, who they're the ones who voted for Giuliani. They're the ones who vote, like, they are so close to supporting some of the worst stuff. And it's a degree of racism that you do get this sense of, when people are shocked of, like, well, how could this working class Black person consider voting for Trump or even Matt Gaetz over Biden, or like the equivalent in Florida to Julianna Margulies, is because, for a lot of working class Black people, okay, well, and I don't agree that Trump or Republicans have economic solutions, but to me, it's like, we've all had bad bosses and they've all been racist to a certain degree. So it's kind of like, then it's not about who we're going to hang out at the country club, because we're not getting invited to the country club anyway.
Yeah.
So that's not about, oh, Liz Cheney's a more polite Republican compared to Donald Trump, and I should want to know. It's like, well, it's all about the kind of boss they are. So, I think a lot of people like Margulies are very off-putting to Black folks who have experienced so much of that in our lives.
Extra condescending. Like, I mean, it's just layers of condescension upon condescension, and just absolute rage, really. Like,
yeah. Well, and
nauseating is like anything that you hear, I think, from like these like official white supremacists.
And no one wants to be the good one. No one likes to be seen as separate from your race. But often, I do think there's a lot of MAGA who will not say that you're the good one, but will not make your race an issue. You're one of us climbing the mountain together, in a way that is certainly more appealing than someone saying, I know you're Black. I'm aware of it every moment. And here's what you owe me because of all the good stuff I've done for you. In a weird way, MAGA becomes much more inclusive because if you buy into the evil and the white supremacy, it's like, okay, we're all wearing the Cobra uniform and yelling Cobra and we're all in it together. But the Margulies is such an othering. It's kind of like, I was never a part of that group. They, them, the trans people's humanity is sort of seen as an indulgence.
Yeah, like, I tolerated you and this is how you repay me? Like, really? That's a bizarrely fucked up thing to say.
Yeah, so I was like a terrible person. And I think also it becomes because it is like Marjorie Taylor Greene type crap, right? Or Lowen Beaupart type crap. Frankly, though, and we know what a lot of our liberal friends would say. They'd be leaping and talking about this. And I think here it's like, oh, well, she's a liberal. I guess she's a Democrat. I guess we can't necessarily go after her in the same way we would if this were Marjorie Taylor Greene on Steve Bannon talking about ignorant Black people or whatever. But this would be everywhere. I mean, this would be something every Democratic. Eric Swalwell would be, a lot of our more socially media savvy, so Eric Swalwell, even Chris Murphy would be sharing that of how dare Marjorie Taylor Greene say this. And so, but because this is and we've been seeing a lot of this, it's dangerous. I think, it's clear that they're part of the Democratic coalition, the winning coalition for 2020 is very much divided. They've been divided on issues of awareness of reality, because I think the idea of like there are people who are very unhappy with the economy, and there was some polling results where it looked like predominantly Black people, Hispanics, and women were not as happy with the economy as a lot of the folks who are telling us that it's just the media telling us that the economy is bad. And and again, people were not believing that data somehow was flawed or everything's flawed. But again, out there, it is interesting, Robyn, because I felt like we'd reached a point where first everyone was saying, well, no, it's all just the media. And then finally someone would acknowledge, it was like, well, no, when I talk to people, particularly people of color and young people, they just feel like, I'm being crushed either from rent, or I can't buy a house if I want to buy a house, or I can't, groceries are more expensive and everything. And, I haven't, often people would then say, often business owners, it's like, well, real wages have kept up with inflation. It's like, have you raised your
exactly.
And everyone would be like, well, this is how much you would have had to raise.
So like,
I'm sure other people, I'm sure other business owners have. I mean, maybe not me, but like, and I feel like there's that disconnect. There's a disconnect again for people of color on Ukraine and stuff. Because as you've noted, I mean, a lot of the America First stuff had historically had an appeal to certain people of color who feel like, look, America will do anything for anyone but us, but my community. And
like, we're going to spend billions of dollars to go bomb some motherfuckers halfway across the globe, or, as to put Whitey on the moon. But no, we're not feeding people. We're not giving people health care because, reasons. People here can't have anything because we need all of that money to go and like kill people of color across the globe.
And, everyone's like, well, the argument's being, well, here's all the terrible stuff Trump is going to do to you. And I don't know, it all seems like it's like a protection racket. It's just sort of, I can't articulate. And I think you'd shared this clip from the this person on comedian online of like how it's not making an affirmative action. You're not making a rather affirmative argument. You're just basically pushing fear, which isn't necessarily compelling. Basically saying that, well, yes, here's all the ways that Trumpism will be worse. And I get that, but there are certain people who are, if you have people willing to, roll the dice on that, you need to actually make an argument beyond saying that they're stupid and brainwashed. I've seen a lot of that. I don't think it doesn't work when you're going door to door. I feel like no one wants to, like, I barely want to answer the door to people anyway, but not if you're going to tell me I've been brainwashed, I'm stupid, and I don't know that I'm not happy. I'm eating my ramen. It's like, no, this is the best economy in the world. And look, I've been privileged.
Working out for you, you ungrateful bastard. It's the worst narrative. It's the worst narrative, period. Like, it's not appealing to anyone except for the fact that it is cathartic to the people who say it. Like, that's really the only people it is helping.
And I've written about this. It's like, it sucks that Biden's approval ratings are so low. I was someone who in 2020, I thought like, okay, well, anyone who makes it so that we can leave the house again, like, should not have to do anything. That's it. You can leave the house again. 60, a 400 electoral vote landslide for the president who presided over us leaving the house again. But that wasn't enough. And I think, what do you think of this? It seems to me that people have sort of blocked out 2020. That was this weird thing that happened to our lives. So they compare now to 2019 and how their lives were in 2019. And so when you look at those comparisons, and a lot of this is, again, not out of Biden's fault, like you can't shut down the economy for an extended period and turn it back on. And, he put in the COVID stimulus, you had to have that, but it's going to lead to some inflationary reactions. This is all known, but ultimately, it's not going to look as great as it did for people in 2019. And they don't remember when they couldn't leave the house. And also for a lot of people who couldn't leave the house, we were, because Democrats weren't trying to sabotage Trump, we passed things that people were still getting paid. And their rent was being on pause. So 2020 was just like, okay, for certain people, a lot of people were struggling and but a lot of people were still able to kind of just Netflix and chill and not die. And in 2021 was sort of the rude awakening, like suddenly like, oh yeah, well, we still want you to go to work when you're half sick and half dead. We were just kidding about having learned about that. So, but what do you think about that? About how do you get past that with people? With those?
I mean, this is the thing. The way that you get past it is people being able to, like, in their lives, afford things. Like that is, like, I mean, really, like, that's the only way. Like, nothing matters but that. What matters is like when people, come home, that they can afford to put food on the table, that they can afford to, go and do some fun things now and then. That is, what anyone wants. And if people can do those things, they're happy with the economy. If they cannot do those things, they are not happy with the economy. That it's never going to go further than that. No one's ever going to be like, well, I'm in a tight bind this month, not really sure I'm going to be able to make my rent, but I've heard some other people are getting raises. So
yeah, I guess there's a lot of that. I mean, again, what I've seen is consumer spending has increased, but people aren't very happy about it. I don't know if they're spending for out of fear that things are going to get worse or whatever this motivation is. But regardless, it's, to me, and maybe I'm a weird person here, and this goes back to yelling at people about being racist and other stuff. It's like, you can lecture people, but ultimately they're voting on their feelings. Voters aren't Vulcans. They don't make logical choices. They make a feeling. They go on all Klingon. I think you've got to address the vibes. You've got to address the feelings that people have. I think the same with like Biden feeling. Like people will say, well, Biden is Trump is younger than Biden, but not by that much. And I don't know, for whatever reason, he's registering as younger to people who take these polls, and the media's fault or whoever's fault is it. I don't know. I mean, I think certainly Biden has seemingly changed from even just 2012, as opposed to Trump. I was looking at video of Trump endorsing Romney, and he seemed to look about the same. He's just always kind of been, and he's always been similarly incoherent, whereas I think Biden has sort of changed in the past 11 years or so. I mean, the age thing shouldn't matter because he's not a psychopath, and we can get someone else better than Trump. But yeah, I'm very concerned that these things are going to lead to, but I'm told not to worry.
This is the thing, like, it can't be you're ungrateful. It has to be we're stepping shit up and trying to do everything that we can to hold on to your votes. That's what people need to hear and also experience. Like that, that is what is going to help, not, oh, you ungrateful bastards. It really, and that seems very obvious. Yeah, you're going to have some trouble with people of color, especially Muslims, next election because of how it was decided to handle this, which is actually like, it was. If you're, yes, you're going to have issues, but fucking start trying. It would be lovely, if perhaps people could learn a little bit about history and what has been going on rather than going off of, quite frankly, vibes. It would be really lovely if people could speak, at least like not be super racist when trying to advocate for what they believe in, or saying, my favorite part of not my favorite, but one of my favorite parts of the Margulies thing was where she was offended as a pretend lesbian. Like, I'm not a lesbian, but I play one on TV. And that is how I am truly offended by young people thinking that maybe we shouldn't, that occupation is maybe a bad idea. Like, maybe it's a bad idea when that happens.
Yeah. Schumer had said something recently, and I think it's also to put in perspective that I think perfectly reasonable what he said, but I think I want to, as I say, imagine Cory Booker saying this about Black specific issues. So Schumer, when criticism against Israel is allowed to cross over into something different, into a denial of a Jewish state in any form, to open calls for very destruction of Israel, while at the same time, the self-determination of other people is exalted, that is the example of the extraordinary double standard Jewish people have always found so hurtful. We worry about what could come next, because for centuries, what is good for everybody else has been too often denied to the Jews. Jews could live here, but not there. Jews could hold this job, but not that. And to declare that only Jewish people cannot have their own state in any form is a glaring example of that double standard Jewish Americans so fiercely object to. I just, again, Cory Booker or Raphael Warnock being that hard on particularly how about racism or Black people will be treated in America, it seems to me would not happen. It is pretty aggressive in ways, and I'm all for being aggressive.
A house, I'm not entitled to move into. I'm not entitled to a house. I can have a house. I am not entitled to move into your house while you are away at a wedding. Like, I can't do that. That is not legal. That doesn't, just like not being able to move into where people live and take over their homes is not oppression. Mm-hmm. That shouldn't be hard.
Well, and also the only Jews are not allowed to have a nation state, as Schumer said. I don't know. I'm trying in good faith to engage with this. It just seems the opposite is true, because from an ethnic or religious standpoint, even America, we say, is a white Christian dominated nation, but it is not supposed to be. It doesn't lead it. and we can say that that's naive, and it actually is, but in theory, it is not supposed to be, right?
Yeah.
Like it is not a white ethno state. When people have argued that a reason that a lot of conservatives in America support is because they want America to be a exclusively white Christian ethno state, this is our place, because America is a place where if you, in theory, you're Black, you become president, you could live here, you could do this, and same. But if what it says there is like, if Israel, if you're not Jew, because this is it is a Jewish state. So in theory, in any of those lands, the Palestinians could not actually be full citizens of that state.
Well, they said from the beginning, we can't allow these people to move back into their homes. We can't allow these people to live in what we've decided our nation is, because that will create a fifth column, and then it won't really be a Jewish state. And I believe that was specifically David Ben-Gurion. But
isn't that the Great Replacement theory, though?
What? Yeah, basically, but backwards, because the people were already there. The thing is that I think that Americans in general, possibly because of the way that America happened, really do have a lot of trouble with the idea of indigenous populations not just being like, oh, I'm sorry, did you want to live here? And the thing is, there has never been there has, but there are very few situations in which people have come and occupied land that other people were on, and everything has been fine. Those people were kicked out and everything, but everything went fine. It was not violent. America, it took violence to make America happen, not just against the British, but against Native Americans. Australia, it took, violence to make that happen, and violence to sustain it. In South America, in South Africa, it took violence to sustain that, and it took violence to overthrow it. Like, I mentioned today, but not really today, that, next week we've got Nelson and the 10-year anniversary of Nelson Mandela's death coming up. And, a lot of the things that people are saying were like, oh, a terrorist is a terrorist. If you're going to bomb people, it doesn't matter if you've been oppressed. It doesn't matter, if you've been occupied. That is unacceptable. But I don't think they'd say that about Nelson Mandela today, because Nelson Mandela was involved in the paramilitary. He started the paramilitary wing of the African National Congress and was considered by the United States to be a terrorist until 2008. I do not see it's never happened.
Yeah.
So to say like, this is what we want, we don't understand why we can't have it, is like, everything is a choice. You're like, I want this, but this also comes with that. Like, we want to occupy this land. We would like this to be our land. There are consequences that come with that.
But it's just not a good consequence for the Palestinians. I think I'm anti-violence, and I'm very much anti-violence in many ways. But this is a case where violence won't work, because you'll get obliterated. You only justify more obliteration. But I get that people disagree with that. I do think
they did peaceful protesting and got their legs blown off. Like, that was what happened.
And I know you'd written about this. We're taping this Friday, so today, but on Friday you wrote about how the Washington Post op-ed about people not wanting to date Trump supporters, and they lamenting about the political becoming the personal. And it's obviously hard when it is personal. And obviously this issue with like Israel or Palestine, whatever, it's not like, and we can say obviously it's personal whether you have health insurance or the minimum wage at a certain level, but it is not that level of disagreement, say 4 years ago, that you might have had with a more mainstream Democrat. It's very different than now. That's what I'm concerned about, because it's certainly gotten much more charged. You could suddenly just be like, no, we need to have this healthcare system, and I could say, oh, we should have this. Now it's more of like, okay, well, you, as I think particularly as someone who's an anti-Zionist, you are an anti-Semitic, and I think that either bullies you, frankly, into being like, okay, I guess I don't want to be an anti-Semitic, so I'll go along with the mainstream view, or you'll say, fuck it, I'm this. So where is this putting you now with this sort of?
Well, for me, I actually agree with a lot of the new Israeli historians, and most Palestinians. Trying to think of the guy's name. But I agree with a lot of actually Israeli historians that the a two-state solution is basically going to be impossible now, largely as a result of movement into the West Bank. Like, it's probably not going to be feasible. What most people who are sane seem to want actually is a one-state solution with equal rights for all, and that has been it's really, as far off as it sounds, it's really the only sane situation that can ever exist.
Well, fortunately, we're dealing with human beings, for whom sanity is always a prominent trait. Well, we're almost at time.
Oh, Ilan Pape, I couldn't think of his name, and Avi Shlam. Those are the people that I was talking about. I just had to Google their names because I did not know how to pronounce them off the top of my head. Yeah, sorry, continue.
We are almost at time. You have anything to say before we depart?
Mostly that I hope I don't get in trouble for saying the things that I said. That's really it, I guess.
Well, we wouldn't want that. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. It's December now, and God, this all goes very quickly, and soon it'll be another year. But until then, we have at least a couple of these. We definitely won't be here on the 23rd. So happy holidays. Bye-bye. Take care.